When it comes to writing fantasy, I don't think the kids really know how an actual writer works, because then everyone's going to copy their story. The thing with me is that I actually have a lot of ideas swimming around in my head, and they usually need a couple more points to be properly fleshed out. So what I'm going to do in this video is take one of the biggest fantasy IPs out there, trim the whole thing up, and turn it into the start of a story that hopefully someone might be able to pick up on, because it's not something that I find myself personally writing in its current form. By the way, if you think you can just write this story and get money, just note that everyone else who watches this video is also going to do the exact same thing that I've written here, and then you have to play the game of who wrote it first. Alternatively, you could just do this as an exercise and see what other people came up with. Or just do this as your English homework or something, I don't know.
真面目に書いたよね。
Quick word of note, I'm actually a scene writer. My writing process works by taking general ideas of what might look cool in my head and coming up with ways to write that out. It might not be the way you do your own writing, but it might help understand some of the claims I say in this video. What I want to talk about in this video is the very first scene. The start of a story matters so much that it's not even funny. Half of all readers will probably stop reading if the first scene doesn't sell. Repeat this for 98% of editors. Okay, so what do we start with? What we don't start with is world building. World building is great and all, yes, but I wouldn't advise digging in too deep. If you delve too deeply into the world building this early, then you basically forestall your story until the world gets so complicated that you really struggle to find the story in all this. And at the end of the day, it's the story that sells, not the world. Instead, we should try to figure out the core of Skyrim. So what's the thing that stands out about Skyrim? I mean, Skyrim has dragons, so we can start there. Yeah, that works. In Skyrim, you are the Dovahkiin, the Dragonborn who can steal the souls of dragons. And so by killing dragons, you get more powerful and stuff. So we should probably think about a world in which the dragons clearly are dangerous and the humans clearly have no immediately obvious way to fight back. I think a good way to start would be having some kind of farmer in the middle of nowhere whose village has been long terrorized by a dragon. So what are some things that might really set the feel and tone of this world? In other words, how can we make this a lot more interesting? First of all, I really like the idea of dragons appearing from a mist. So I might start with a farmer walking towards a foggy village with maybe some baskets of vegetables or something. So what's up with this village? Well, what if this local dragon has been eating people for so long that there never has been anyone that managed to get older than 25? Yeah, that'll be edgy. And what if in order for this village to survive, they have to constantly be having enough children to replace the ones that get eaten by the dragon? Yeah, that'll be real edgy. The more pressing question here is how to actually convey that kind of information to the reader. Exposition often comes across as being lectured, and being lectured is not fun. Also, because most authors are probably educated through lectures, most authors just naturally lecture people. Do you see where the problem is? So how do you explain important information? Well, in Hirohiko Araki Sensei's book, Manga in Theory and Practice, he suggests to relay information and introduce characters simultaneously. Basically, if you exposition while also doing another thing like character dynamics, then it becomes far more engaging than if you did each separately. His book's on Amazon, by the way. Also read JoJo. So, let's have this 17 to 18-year-old farm boy named Adam, who walks into the village and he sees that there's this gathering. Turns out that one older boy called Matthew has the idea of fighting against the dragon that's been dominating the village. He has a spear, but it's just a knife that's been tied around a pole. Matthew doesn't stand a chance against the dragon, but he's at the age that he's going to be eaten anyway. Now, if there's one thing you have to understand about dialogue, it's that literally everyone else hates having to write it. Therefore, if you actually find a way to enjoy writing dialogue, then you immediately stand out from the crowd. The second part is that dialogue is not about prose, but about voice. Nice poll. Shut it, coward. You aren't dying today, and I envy you, but your time will come when that dragon considers you old enough to be its next meal. When I slay the dragon, you will grovel at my feet. You do realize it's a myth told by an ancient idiot, and in that story the guy has a magical sword. You've got a pointy stick. So there are a couple things about the way I wrote this out. First of all, I wanted to riff on the whole heroes killing dragons thing because it sounded kind of fun. Second, it shows that people actually have the desire to kill dragons when they can, but they often can't. Third is that most people who try to kill dragons are insane idiots who are probably going to die anyway. From here, we can start to work on the dragon who will eventually show up. I think one of the biggest ideas we can take from Skyrim in particular is this idea of not only killing dragons, but also stealing their souls. So there's kind of a big opportunity that was missed in how if you have actually stolen a dragon soul, then you kind of have to live with it, right? So what if this dragon lives in your head rent-free? So if this dragon is going to be a central character, then we need to start figuring them out. Personally, I'd go with a Najosama who's down on her luck because it would be good for comedy and whatnot, but it'd be interesting to see what kind of dragon you guys came up with and where that path led you. Okay, so now a dragon roar echoes through the valley, spooking everyone else back into their homes except for the few stuck out in the middle of the village. With a massive beat of its wings, the dragon lands in the village looking for a human snag. While I think having the dragon rampage through the village would be a way to show how little disregard dragons have for human life, I think it would be a little bit too cartoony. Instead, a better idea would be to align their behavior with their personalities. For example, since I'm doing it in a Najosama, I'd want her to be a bit more picky about what sort of human she's going to eat. Another world-building detail we could add here is that Skyrim has its own dragon language, which, when understood, is how dragons use magic. Personally, I think it would be even more interesting to, first of all, have two magic systems. One for humans and one for dragons, and they are mostly incompatible. I might also have it so that humans can't understand dragons unless the human has managed to siphon off a dragon soul, but that sounds like a lot of narrative effort for such a low payoff. What I'm not going to do is try and make a constructed language. Tolkien was a language professor and has actually translated Beowulf into modern English. Putting that kind of pressure on a 20-year-old undergrad is not good for a writer's mental health. Back to the story, most people in the village just shut their doors and hope the idiots out in the open get eaten instead of them. Matthew charges the dragon with his spear. Now, here's where you can really show off how powerful this single dragon is. Bear in mind though that your main character is probably relatively close in this situation, so just be careful that the attack doesn't just blow up the entire city. What I might do though is kind of a black humor moment where the dragon just sort of snorts in the general direction of Matthew and turns him into barbecue. It still shows how powerful the dragon is, but you don't have to overdo power levels for them to feel impactful. Now, somehow we need to figure out a way for our main character to actually slay the dragon. There are probably several other ways to do it, but, well, personally I think having the main character take up the pointy stick, and when the dragon eats him, he stabs the makeshift spear into the dragon's soft flesh, and that makes the dragon choke or something, and then it dies. And then our main character has the dragon soul. Yay. The question after this is a fairly big one. While I think it's a good idea to be concerned about stuff like themes and messaging, I think the more important question is that of the story vehicle. Vehicles are basically what drives the character and also the story onwards. While I think Adam joining a bunch of dragon hunters, for example, is a vehicle, there's a more fundamental question that my script coach asks me quite often since she's a character writer, which is that of what does Adam even want from all of this? It's something I struggle with quite a lot, but I usually figure something out after writing a couple scenes getting to know my MC, picking out bits and bobs of the dialogue and mannerisms of it, and really starting to create a single core emotion that he might be trying to avoid or hide, and really start to cement that as part of his person. This really is a skeleton of the story, and I'm actually quite interested to see what you've made out of this. You could also be, just watching this for fun or something. If you did actually manage to write something, then write a comment about it below. If enough people actually have something to share, then maybe I'll start a Reddit or something. I don't know.